We're going to take a moment and divert away from focusing ideas to take a look at thesis statements. And then what we're going to do is tie all of the ideas together, and I'm going to show you an example in writing that encapsulates all the ideas or kind of exemplifies how you go through this process and translate it into a piece of writing. And it'll be just an example, but it's something that you can go by as you start to plan your own upcoming essay. Oftentimes we hear the word thesis, theses. We're aware of it. We know that it's a concept. Sometimes thinking and sometimes I think believing that it's an elementary concept, yet many people do not know how to actually employ theses or thesis statements, do not know what they are. And a lot of time writing suffers because there's no central anchor. There's no statement that's in charge. There's no backbone to the essay or piece of writing that really drives the content and dictates the order of the content and how ideas are presented. Theses are extremely important. Every single thing you write should have a thesis statement. Let's take a look at what a thesis statement is. A thesis statement identifies the subject of the piece of writing. It indicates the viewpoint or the perspective of the analysis in this instance, and often forecasts the essay's organization. It tells us what you're writing about, how you're writing about it. So in other words, what are the main ideas you will be covering, why, and why it's important. Writers often turn to their thesis statement to determine what elements of their writing needs to be revised, removed, or added. It gives direction for your essay and is, quote, in charge. I like to think of your thesis statement, as I've mentioned, as an anchor for your writing. After you go through the pre-writing phase, you identify an idea, you focus the idea, you go through the critical analytical framework, macro and micro levels of analyses, and you decide what it is you want to write about and the different components of that idea. Then you need to formulate that into a thesis statement that tells us, what are those three ideas you're going to be covering. But moreover, why are you covering them and why are they important? It's a way for us to gauge that our ideas are consistent, that our ideas are focused, that similar ideas remain in similar areas within our writing. You can look to your thesis statement to determine if certain ideas need to be revised to be made more relevant to the main point you're trying to convey, whether or not elements of your writing or ideas or sections or paragraphs or sentences need to be removed altogether because they're not congruent with your thesis statement. And sometimes you might need to adjust your thesis statement in itself when certain ideas become more apparent as you're writing. This is important because it is indicative of writing, academic writing, being reflective of thought. Writing and thinking are inextricably bound. Just because you start with a thesis statement does not mean that you're going to follow through to the end of your project following that same thesis statement. Because you are learning, because you are analyzing, you're constantly researching different ideas and looking at different perspectives, your original idea, a perspective, or thesis statement may change, and it's quite acceptable for you to alter that thesis statement and move things around and change your ideas as long as it makes sense in the end, as long as it's logical, there's reasoning behind your claims and your points. That's completely fine. The process is dynamic. Things will change. In fact, sometimes it's encouraging for things to change because it's showing that you are thinking as an academic. You're changing your perspective based on the information you find in your academic searches. So it's quite all right. But the main point is the thesis statement is giving you a reference point as a writer for how to organize or create an outline for your content and how to revise and how to move pieces around to make it make more sense for your reader. It also exists, or thesis statements also exist for the reader as a guidepost. It is an initial statement that lets the reader know exactly what's coming, how the work is going to be organized and why it's organized in that way. It gives us a forecast into the dominant theme or the perspective that your paper or your piece of writing is going to provide for the reader. Ideas are continually developing as you write, thus revising, replacing a thesis statement is not a bad indicator. It is simply a reminder that writing is thinking, as I just mentioned. I just failed to hit the slide. Who needs a thesis statement? Again, both writer and reader are equally able to see and evaluate how the thesis statement influences content, format, what's being said, and how it should be organized. Let's take a look at a sample thesis statement, and this is not really an academic thesis statement. This is more of a personal type of thesis statement, more of a personal essay or a reflective or subjective piece. This is not academic in any way, but I just wanted to provide a simple example to show somewhat how these sentences operate. I admired my cousin's decision to enlist because she had to withstand criticism from people who thought women shouldn't be in the Army, and because in basic training she had to stand up to physical and mental challenges that I don't think I could face. Just as a sidebar, what makes this non-academic writing? For one, there's contractions. In academic writing, we never have contractions. We will spell out all words, should not, do not. What also makes this non-academic is the fact that it's completely subjective. It's including personal pronouns, I, me, my, we. It's a reflective piece. So this is not what we're going for. This is just a simple example just to show you the nature of a thesis statement. But I think by now, if you've looked at all of the other videos and you've engaged in the other assignments, you understand that objectivity is paramount and that you separate yourself on a personal level. You separate your bias in academic writing. So you never see a thesis statement that looks like this. Alas, again, it's just an example. I admired my cousin's decision to enlist because she had to withstand criticism from people who thought women shouldn't be in the Army, and because in basic training she had to stand up to physical and mental challenges that I don't think I could face. If we break this down, if we look at the blue text, admired my cousin's decision to enlist, this is clearly the focus of what's to come, right? In this essay, this is going to be the general focus or anchor or the central foci of everything you're going to discuss or this person's going to discuss in that particular piece of writing. It's a simple statement denoting the admiration of the cousin's decision to enlist. In red, you will see she had to withstand criticism from people who thought women shouldn't be in the Army. And then in green, in basic training, she had to stand up to physical and mental challenges that I don't think I could face. So if we start dissecting this, we'll see that the red text, withstanding criticism from people who thought women shouldn't be in the Army, is topic 1. So that's the first main topic, if you will. In the green, main topic 2. And we can even further subdivide these topics. For instance, withstanding criticism for people who thought women shouldn't be in the Army, by looking at the physical and the mental challenges specifically and subdividing it in that way. That's just a simple example. I'm going to show you one that's more academic that will make more sense in the context of this first essay. A thesis statement can be stated explicitly or outright, or it can be implied. The first essay is going to have an explicit thesis statement. Go ahead and scratch the implied thesis statement. It is always good practice as a beginning writer to focus on always implementing an outright thesis statement, a statement that is always going to be present in every single piece of academic writing, and that you know is going to drive the content and help both you and the reader keep your content and ideas organized. Where do theses belong? Some of the shorter works, thesis statement tends to be located in the first paragraph, last sentence. Now, that's a very basic or elementary type of idea because it depends on the purpose, again, of your assignment and the scope as to where that will be located. In longer works, it may take longer to lay the groundwork. For instance, if someone wants to build, for instance, in a dissertation, someone wants to build a very substantive argument and then lead up to a thesis statement, then it may take some time to build some chronological pieces of information or spatial or order of importance, and then build to the thesis statement where it culminates in that explicit thesis statement. You may open with a question and work through answers and state a thesis as a conclusion. It is completely contingent upon the purpose of the assignment, the purpose of the writing at hand. For us in this particular first contextual essay, I would say it's a good rule of thumb to include it clearly in your introductory section towards the end of your paragraph. If your introductory section is 2 paragraphs, then I would have it closer to the end of that introduction section. We will experiment with this in different other types of writing in the class, but this is a good idea for this first essay. In more complex pieces, the thesis statement is more than just a sentence. For us, it's usually going to be a very complex sentence, hence the last module or the last topic we talked about starting to get into the practice of developing more complex sentence structures. A thesis statement, because it encapsulates so much information and it has to cover so many different ideas in one sentence, by its very inherent nature is going to be a complex sentence structure. And I'll show you an example of a very academic, a very solid thesis statement in just a moment. What we need to start doing is thinking of thesis statements as a claim. When we think of this from a science perspective, we sometimes think of when we make hypotheses, or research questions for certain ideas. When we are writing expository writing, the thesis statement is a claim. It is the main assertion or the main idea that you are getting across or that you are informing via your expository writing to your reader. A claim is to assert or maintain as fact. So through all of your levels of analysis, through understanding the overall situation, through breaking it down, through reorganizing and narrowing the ideas, based on what you know, based on your research, once you do that and you make that information or formulate that information into an outline, into content that you can write about, your thesis statement is in itself a statement that is an assertion of maintaining as fact. What you're saying is true. It's objective information that is factual. And so think of it that way. It is a main claim for the point or argument, if you will, that you will be making in your essay. There is the implication that we will not believe a statement unless the speaker or writer provides support for it. Whenever a claim is made, what do we instinctively do? We look for the evidence. We look for the reasons and the assertions and all of the logical evidence that back up or support that claim. So when we start looking at how to start fleshing out an essay like the one that you're going to be writing about, all of your main points A, B, and C, all of the subpoints within those particular sections are all going to align or be congruent with your thesis statement. They're all going to be supporting or providing the evidence for that thesis that you are using as the main claim for the point you're trying to convey. Here's an example here that is the antithesis or the opposite of a thesis or a claim, or a thesis as a claim. President George W. Bush was the 43rd president of the United States. Why is that not a claim? It's not debatable. It's simple, factual information. It's not arguable. Thus, it's not a claim. It's not a thesis. when we start thinking in terms of theses as claims, it has to be something that's debatable, something that's dynamic or multifaceted enough, or at a level that's higher enough that it can be analyzed from different perspectives, or can be broken down, or can have many oppositional viewpoints in some kind of way.